At 11:45, the cafeteria doors opened, and the whole school seemed to smell like warm cheese, cardboard trays, chocolate milk, and disinfectant. For millions of kids, the best pizza in the world came on a plastic tray at 11:45 in the morning. By normal pizza standards, it should not have worked. The crust was soft, the cheese was rubbery, and the sauce was barely there. But somehow that rectangle became unforgettable. This story is about more than pizza. It is about routine, freedom, policy, and childhood baked into a rectangle. Pizza Day announced itself before you reached the line. Plastic trays slapped onto metal rails, milk cartons sweated under fluorescent lights, and everyone leaned forward to see if the menu board was telling the truth. Then came the slice, a rectangle with squared edges, melted cheese pulling at the corners, tiny pepperoni cubes scattered like confetti, and sauce that was just a little sweet. Beside it sat canned fruit, corn, or green beans, usually ignored until the very end. The table was part of the meal. Someone traded chocolate milk for chips. Someone saved the best corner bite. The room got louder because lunch was the one stretch of the day that belonged to the kids. It was not only food, it was noise, trays, friends, and 20 minutes away from class. So why did this pizza become the cafeteria legend above everything else? Cafeteria pizza was not competing with the slice shop down the street. It was not delivery pizza, frozen pizza, or the homemade kind pulled from an oven on a weekend. It belonged to a separate universe with different rules. The crust was soft instead of crisp, often baked in huge sheet pans and cut into rectangles. The cheese could stretch, clump, or settle into a shiny layer. The sauce leaned sweet. The toppings were tiny, and sometimes the meat was so diced it felt more like a clue than an ingredient. That is why judging it like normal pizza misses the point. School pizza did not have to be good pizza, and once you stopped measuring it by pizzeria standards, the weirdness started to look practical. The real story was not only taste, it was logistics. Pizza fit the cafeteria because it behaved well under pressure. A kitchen could bake it in large pans, cut it into equal portions, slide it onto trays fast, and know almost exactly how many servings were coming out of each batch. It also used ingredients that made sense for school operations. Dough, sauce, cheese, and toppings could be standardized, stored, ordered in predictable amounts, and prepared by staff who were already stretched thin. When a lunchroom had to feed hundreds or even thousands of students in a short window, that predictability mattered. There was another advantage: kids usually accepted it. Cafeterias could not afford a menu item that too many students ignored because wasted food was wasted money, wasted labor, and a planning problem the next day. So pizza became dependable. It was not just popular, it solved portioning, speed, storage, staffing, budget, and student approval all at once. Pizza Day turned the lunch menu into school news. Kids checked the paper calendar taped to the fridge, circled Friday, or heard the rumor in homeroom before the bell even rang. By mid-morning, everyone wanted confirmation. At lunch, the cafeteria line changed. Students walked faster, friends saved spots, and even kids with packed lunches asked if they could buy just one slice. The worst outcome was reaching the counter and seeing an empty tray, because pizza running out felt like missing the only real event of the day. That was the power of it. In a lunchroom full of trades, complaints, and suspicious side dishes, pizza created rare agreement. Almost everyone understood why it mattered, and the symbol was instantly recognizable. Not a slice from a pizzeria, but a hot, soft-edged rectangle on a plastic tray. The rectangle solved problems before it became nostalgic. Cafeterias baked pizza on sheet pans, moved it through ovens, cut it into equal portions, and stacked it onto trays for hundreds of students at once. Round pies wasted space. Triangles made serving less predictable. Rectangles fit the system. That shape also fit the lunch tray. It sat beside corn, fruit cocktail, and a milk carton without sliding into everything else. For workers on a tight schedule, it meant speed, portion control, and fewer arguments over who got the bigger piece. The rectangle was not just a shape, it was a cafeteria signature. One glance at it can send adults back to a lunch table, a plastic tray, and a milk carton sweating under fluorescent lights. The slice's shape mattered, but the room around it mattered even more. Lunch was the one part of the school day that felt almost independent. You carried your own tray, chose your seat if you were lucky, and had a few minutes where the teacher's voice was replaced by 100 conversations bouncing off cinder block walls. That pizza arrived in the middle of all of it. Someone opened chocolate milk. Someone tried to trade fruit cocktail for extra fries. Someone ate the cheese first, or folded the rectangle in half, or saved the crust until the bell was about to ring. The lunch period was short, noisy, and constantly watched by adults. But compared to class, it felt like a break in the system. That is why the pizza tasted bigger than its ingredients. It came with friends, gossip, food trades, and the relief of not raising your hand to speak. But that feeling did not appear by accident. Behind every tray was a food system built to feed millions of students on schedule. To make pizza work in a school cafeteria, it had to become predictable. Districts could not depend on a cook cook making dough from scratch for hundreds or thousands of students before noon. They needed food that arrived with instructions, portion sizes, nutrition information, and a price that fit a tight budget. So, cafeteria pizza often came frozen or partly prepared from large suppliers. A factory could make the crust, add sauce and cheese, package the slices, and ship them in cases. Schools stored those cases in freezers, moved them to ovens on pizza day, reheated them, held them warm, and served them quickly as each lunch wave came through. Ingredients were also shaped by the system. Schools used standardized recipes, approved vendors, and commodity foods, meaning basic ingredients purchased or supplied through government programs. None of this was sinister. It was logistics. Once lunch has to feed children at this scale, rules, costs, storage, and standards begin deciding what lands on the tray. Pizza also had to qualify as part of a reimbursable school meal. That meant it was not judged only as pizza. It was judged by how its components fit federal meal patterns: grain in the crust, dairy in the cheese, tomato in the sauce, and sometimes meat or vegetables as toppings. Those rules affected the slice itself. A school pizza might use a specific amount of cheese, a crust made with more whole grain, a sauce portion that helped meet vegetable requirements, or a recipe adjusted to fit sodium targets. The goal was to make one popular item satisfy several boxes on the tray. Budgets made the puzzle tighter. Federal reimbursements helped pay for meals, but districts still had to manage food costs, labor, equipment, and waste. A slice students would actually eat mattered, because untouched food did not help anyone. That is how cafeteria pizza moved beyond taste. It became part of debates over vegetables, whole grains, sodium, and what school lunch should be. By the time nutrition reforms tightened, cafeteria pizza had two reputations at once. To students, it was still the dependable lunch day, the square slice that made the tray feel worth carrying. To many parents, policymakers, and health advocates, it represented the problem with school food: processed, salty, engineered for acceptance, and too close to fast food. Districts tried to close that gap without losing the crowd. Vendors reformulated recipes with whole grain crusts, lower sodium cheese, leaner toppings, and sauces counted more carefully toward vegetable servings. Some slices looked familiar but tasted different. Others became softer, denser, or less greasy than the version students remembered. That change revealed the hardest part of school lunch reform. A meal can satisfy the standards on paper and still fail if it ends up in the trash. Cafeterias were not only serving nutrients, they were serving children with habits, preferences, and very short lunch periods. So pizza became complicated because it carried both expectations. It had to be healthier than memory, but still loved like memory. Today, school pizza depends heavily on where you are. One district may serve a branded slice from a national supplier. Another may bake its own version with a whole grain crust, reduced sodium sauce, and locally purchased cheese. Some cafeterias have convection ovens, warming cabinets, and staff trained for scratch cooking. Others are working with aging equipment, tight labor, and a budget that leaves little room for mistakes. Menus change too. Pizza now competes with chicken sandwiches, wraps, salad bars, pasta bowls, and grab-and-go items built for shorter lunch periods. Students also arrive with different tastes, shaped by delivery apps, frozen pizzas, fast casual restaurants, and social media food trends. Then there is the memory problem. Adults are not comparing today's slice to an exact record. They are comparing it to lunchroom noise, Friday excitement, and being young enough for cafeteria pizza to feel like an event. So did cafeteria pizza actually taste good? Honestly, sometimes yes, often no, and somehow that was the point. The crust could be soft in the middle and dry at the edges. The cheese stretched like rubber, then cooled into a single orange blanket. The sauce was usually too sweet. One corner might be lava hot while the other was barely warm. And the toppings, if there were toppings, seemed chosen by a committee that had only heard rumors about vegetables. But in the lunchroom, those flaws were not deal breakers. They were part of the genre. You were not judging it against a pizzeria. You were judging it against meatloaf, mystery casserole, and whatever came in the divided tray next to canned peaches. The pizza was not perfect, but school never asked for perfect. School asked for pizza day. And maybe the ingredient people miss most is not in the recipe. It is the life that came around it. What people miss is the schedule around the slice. They miss watching the clock crawl toward lunch, lining up by classroom, and hearing the cafeteria before they even reached the doors. Trays clattered, milk cartons sweated, someone had birthday cupcakes in a plastic carrier, someone was trying to trade peaches for fries, and on Fridays, pizza meant the week was loosening its grip. For 20 minutes, you were not solving worksheets or asking permission to sharpen a pencil. You were choosing a seat, saving a spot for a friend, deciding whether chocolate milk was worth the extra charge, and feeling, in some tiny way, in charge of yourself. That is why the pizza works like a shortcut. One square slice slice can bring back the whole system, the bell, the table, the noise, the freedom. And that is why adults still chase the recipe. They are not only trying to recreate lunch, they are trying to get back to the one part of school that felt like theirs. Today, that chase lives online. Search school pizza recipe, and you will find message boards, short videos, freezer aisle reviews, and comment sections full of people comparing crust thickness, sauce, sweetness, and whether the cheese should brown at the edges. Some are baking copycat rectangle slices at home. Others are buying frozen versions that promise cafeteria style. The details become evidence on screen. This is where the legacy gets visual. Recreated lunch trays with corn and chocolate milk, old menu cards with Friday pizza circled, home kitchens testing sheet pans, and documentary-style cards showing the same square slice moving from cafeteria line to internet obsession. The recipe searches are not only about dinner, they are about proving a memory had a flavor, a shape, and a texture. That is the final turn in the story. School pizza was ordinary food made by the tray, served fast and forgotten by design. Childhood made it iconic. So maybe the slice was never supposed to be perfect. It was too square, too soft, too mass-produced, and somehow exactly right on a plastic tray beside chocolate milk, friends, and a 20-minute break from class. That is why people still remember it. Thanks for watching. If you had a school pizza day, write your memory in the comments.